Her ex planned the perfect revenge party against her. She showed up, but she wasn't alone. His calm presence was stronger than any threats. One conversation at the bar, and her ex begged for forgiveness. Let's go back a week. Enjoy. The phone lies on the table, vibrating quietly as it moves across the glass surface. Ifeoma looks up from her book. She doesn't expect any important calls at this hour. A name flashes on the screen. Gavin. She hasn't seen or heard from him for almost 6 months. Their last conversation was short and pointed. She stares at the pulsing screen. Her finger instinctively reaches for the call button. She slowly raises the phone to her ear. Hello? Ifeoma. Hello. His voice is too cheerful, too loud. There's that unnatural, forced warmth in it that she recognizes immediately. How are you? It's been a while since you called. I'm fine, Gavin. She answers evenly, without emotion. What happened? Nothing. Everything's great. He laughs lightly and it grates on her ear. I just thought I'd catch up with some old friends. I'm having a little party here tomorrow. Almost everyone I used to hang out with is coming. Do you remember the guys? It'll be fun. She's silent. She remembers those guys well. His friends who always looked down on her, whose jokes were sharp and hurtful, who were always on his side. I'm not sure, Gavin. Oh, come on, he interrupts her, his tone laced with her usual condescension. Are you busy? Or are you afraid of the old us? He pauses, letting the venom of the words sink in. Just come in, for a little while. It'll be like old times. Ifeoma closes her eyes. The good old days are different things for him and for her. For him, it's a time when he controlled her every move. For her, it's a time she escaped. Okay, Gavin, she says finally, and her own voice sounds foreign to her. I'll stop by, just for a bit. That's great! The triumph in his voice was barely concealed now. I'm waiting. Don't let me down. She doesn't say goodbye. She simply lowers the phone and places it on the table. The call ends. Gavin stands in the middle of his new living room. He still has his phone in his hand. A wide, satisfied smile plays on his lips. He's just finished decorating the room for tomorrow's party. Colorful string lights twinkle above the fireplace. Balloons are tied to the chairs. He replays their brief conversation in his mind. Her hesitation, her agreement. He can almost hear her trying to be invisible, sitting quietly in the corner while everyone else was having fun. He imagined the scene even before he dialed her number. His friends will know, of course. He's already hinted to them that Ifeoma might drop by. He described it as an act of mercy on his part, inviting his ex, who clearly lacks companionship. He knows they'll support him. They always have. They'll ask her innocent questions about work, about her personal life, and he'll stand next to her, glass in hand, and watch her fidget, searching for words. He'll make her feel like a stranger in this room, in this house that was once hers too. She'll understand that leaving him was his big mistake. He wants to see that moment of understanding in her eyes, a moment of regret. He puts the phone on the shelf. The plan is perfect, simple and effective. She will come alone. She has no one else. He is sure of it. She will be vulnerable. And he will be surrounded by his people, his success, his new life without her. This will be his small, elegant revenge for her departure, for her decision to leave him. He straightens an imaginary tie in front of a non-existent mirror and nods to himself. Tomorrow evening will be very revealing. Ifeoma sits in silence. The evening light from the window casts a long stripe across the floor. A book lies forgotten nearby. Her mind races, replaying every moment of the conversation, every intonation in Gavin's voice. This sweet, sticky goodwill is pure theater. He never called without a reason, never invited her anywhere without an ulterior motive. It's a trap, clear and obvious. He didn't invite her to make peace or just chat. He invited her to prove something, to himself, to his friends, and most of all, to her. She imagines his living room, full of people looking at her with curiosity and disdain. She hears their laughter, muffled but directed at her. She sees him, Gavin, at the center of attention, happy and smug, watching her discomfort as if it were amusement. In the past, such a thought would have made her heart beat faster with fear. She would have spent a long time deciding what to wear so as not to attract attention. She would have made up excuses to leave early. She would have endured the entire evening and then cried alone. But now she doesn't feel fear. She feels tired, a deep, bone-deep tiredness from this game, from his constant need to prove something, to put someone in their place. She walked away from it, walked away to find peace, and now he's dragging her back into this toxic circus. She gets up and goes to the window. The streetlights are coming on. She doesn't want to go there. Every cell in her body resists the idea. But if she doesn't come, he'll think he's won, that she was scared, that his tactics worked. She clasps her hands. No, she can't give him this pleasure. She can't let him think his words still have power over her. She has to come. But coming alone means playing by his rules. And that's a losing strategy from the start. She needs a different plan, something that will change the balance of power, not confrontation. She doesn't want a scandal. She needs a shield, a simple but undeniable presence that will deprive Gavin of his greatest weapon, the feeling that she's alone and vulnerable. She turns from the window and looks at her phone. One name comes to mind, a man whose calm is impenetrable, a man whose mere presence is often enough to cool any ardor. She slowly picks up the phone. Tomorrow evening may be revealing, but not in the way Gavin imagines. She has one important call to make. Ifeoma invites Taemin to dinner at a small, quiet establishment. It's a place with a neutral atmosphere, serving simple food. She chooses a table in the corner, away from the mainstream of people. When Taemin arrives, he seems the calmest person in the room. He moves easily, without fuss, and sits down across from her. His usual restraint now has a calming effect on her. They order food. They talk about neutral things. Her work, his current affairs, a recent film. But Ifeoma feels a slight tension inside. She plays with her fork, pushing breadcrumbs across the tablecloth. Taemin notices it. He always notices details. Something bothering you? He asks finally. His voice is quiet but clear. He's not insisting, just stating a fact. Ifeoma puts down her fork. She takes a deep breath and begins to talk. About Gavin's call. About his tone, full of false kindness. About the party. There's silence at the table. Not awkward, but rather thoughtful. Taemin isn't looking at Ifeoma, but somewhere past, as if assessing the situation from all sides. His fingers tap lightly on the tabletop, the only sign that he's considering something. When is this party? He asks finally. Ifeoma replies. Taemin nods, as if this is an important technical detail. He looks at her again, his gaze direct but not oppressive. I don't have any plans tomorrow evening, he says calmly, as if reporting the weather. If you don't mind, I could come with you, just to keep you company. He doesn't ask, do you want me to go with you? He doesn't say, I'll protect you. He simply states a fact. He has time, and he offers it as an escort. There's no heroism or challenge in his offer. It's a simple, practical idea, like taking an umbrella when it's cloudy outside. Ifeoma freezes. She expected advice, maybe a little support, but not such a direct and unconditional offer. It sounds so simple that for a second she's at a loss. She looks at his calm face, his collected posture. He doesn't expect gratitude. He's simply offering a solution. Ifeoma's head, thoughts collide. Her first thought, no, that's too much, drawing him into her old, dirty squabbles. This isn't his world, not his problems. Gavin and his friends are like annoying flies, and Taemin is something from another, more serious and quiet dimension. She doesn't want to drag him into this melodrama. Second thought, but he's right. This is the most sensible decision. She can't go alone, and to refuse and not come would be to lose without even engaging. His presence isn't a sword, but a wall. You don't need to ask him to do or say anything. It's enough that he's there. She remembers Gavin's look, full of self-satisfaction. She remembers the feeling of being made small and insignificant. Then she looks at Taemin, at his complete lack of fuss. He won't prove anything to Gavin. He probably won't even talk to him much. His very demeanor, quiet, confident, not seeking approval, will change the entire balance in that room. Are you sure? She finally breathes. This won't be the most pleasant evening. There will be people there who aren't the most well-mannered. Taemin's mouth twitches slightly, almost a smile. I've been in worse places, he says softly. It doesn't matter. It's about making you feel comfortable, or at least safe. The words safe are everything. She understands that this is exactly what she's been missing. A feeling of simple physical and emotional safety. Not drama, not conflict, just a quiet shield. She no longer hesitated. Fear had given way to cold determination, and now to a slight sense of relief. Okay, Ifeoma says, her voice firmer than it has been all evening. Yes, please. Let's stay together. I'll be very grateful. Taemin simply nods, taking her agreement for granted. Okay, it's a deal. I'll pick you up tomorrow. He returns to his food, as if they'd just discussed where to go grocery shopping. Ifeoma leans back in her chair. The heavy feeling in her stomach disappears, replaced by a light, almost unfamiliar confidence. She looks at Taemin, who is calmly finishing his meal. Tomorrow evening no longer feels like a trap. Now, it's simply a place she needs to go, not alone, and that makes all the difference. Evening falls. Ifeoma stands in front of her closet. She doesn't want to look like she's tried too hard. That would give Gavin a reason for snide remarks. She also doesn't want to look poor or sloppy. That would confirm his supposed rightness. She pushes aside several brightly colored dresses he'd worn before when she was trying to fit in with his circle. She runs her fingers over the fabric and settles on one. It's a deep navy blue, almost like the night sky. It's simple in cut. Long sleeves, a round neckline. The fabric softly clings to her figure but doesn't restrict her movement. No rhinestones, ruffles, or flashy patterns. It's elegant and understated. She puts it on. It fits perfectly. It doesn't scream, but simply exists, emphasizing her assets rather than trying to prove anything. She looks in the mirror. She sees her reflection. She styles her hair simply, leaving it sleek. She applies minimal makeup, just enough to highlight her features. Nothing flashy. There's no longer any anxiety in her gaze. There's only quiet determination. The phone rings softly. A message from Taemin. "I'm downstairs." She grabs her small bag, takes a final breath, and leaves the apartment. Taemin arrived and wasn't flashy or new. It was simply a black car with tinted windows, clean and well-maintained. It was parked at the curb, the engine running almost silently. Ifeoma climbed into the passenger seat. Taemin was wearing a dark classic suit, no tie. He nodded hello. They drive in silence. There's no music, only the quiet hum of the engine and the city outside the window. Ifeoma looks at the familiar streets that lead to her old home. Her hands rest calmly in her lap. She doesn't feel the same fear. There's tension, but it's cool, collected, like a spring. The car turns smoothly onto their former street. A few houses away, the rumble of bass can be heard. The music is coming from the open windows of Gavin's familiar house. Several other cars are parked in the driveway. Movement and flickering figures can be seen in the windows. Taemin's car stops right in front of the front door. He gets out first, his movements smooth and precise. He walks around the hood and opens the door for Ifeoma. She steps out, adjusting the folds of her dress. The noise of the party now seems very loud. Laughter, shouts, the clinking of glasses can be heard. They stand side by side on the sidewalk. Taemin looks at the illuminated door, his expression completely neutral. He gives her a second to compose herself. "Ready?" he asks quietly, his voice barely audible over the music. Ifeoma nods. She doesn't look at him, her gaze fixed on the door. "Yes, let's go." They walk toward the house together. He doesn't take her arm, doesn't try to feign anything. He simply walks beside her, half a step behind, creating space but remaining an integral part of her appearance. The door is unlocked. Ifeoma presses the handle and enters first. A wave of warm air, mixed with the scent of food, perfume, and loud music, washes over her. The entryway is small. Immediately beyond it is the living room, crowded with people. 20 people, maybe more. Everyone is holding glasses. Someone is dancing near the stereo speaker. A small group is laughing loudly near the fireplace. Others are standing at the table with snacks. The first people to notice her are two people at the entrance. A guy she barely recognizes as one of Gavin's old friends, and his girlfriend. They pause in their conversation. The guy looks at Ifeoma, his eyebrows raised in surprise. His gaze slides from her to the tall figure of Taemin, who has stepped into the hallway after her and is now standing behind her, filling the doorway. The smile on the guy's face fades. Ifeoma steps forward into the living room. She doesn't look directly at anyone, but sees everything out of the corner of her eye. Her appearance has the effect of a stone dropped into a pond. A wave of silence spreads from the epicenter. The next people to see them are the group by the fireplace. One girl, talking about something, notices that her interlocutors are looking not at her, but somewhere over their shoulders. She turns around. Her mouth drops open. Her story breaks off mid-sentence. Then the dancers. One of them, making a move, makes eye contact with Ifeoma. He stumbles in time, and the music now seems inappropriately loud. The silence isn't absolute. The music still plays, but one by one, all the conversations die down. The laughter stops. People freeze, glasses raised to their lips. Whispers, quick, surprised, run through the room. All eyes are now on them. On her, in her simple blue dress, radiating a calm no one expected. And on him, on Taemin, standing straight and motionless behind her right shoulder. He doesn't smile. He doesn't frown. He simply stares into space ahead, and his silent, confident presence seems like a physical force, shifting the pressure in the room. Everyone's eyes are searching for the host. Everyone understands that the main show is about to begin, and the stage is no longer Gavin's. Gavin stands in the far corner of the living room, leaning against the doorframe. He holds a glass of dark liquor and smiles broadly, listening to a guy talking loudly. Gavin feels like the king of the evening. Everything is going according to plan. He's already mentally rehearsed the moment when the door opens and Ifeoma appears, timid, lonely, uncertain. He's been waiting for this moment for the past few hours. His friend says something, but Gavin is barely listening anymore. His gaze glides around the room, reveling in the sight of his success, and then he notices a change. His friend falls silent, looking somewhere over Gavin's shoulder. Strange expressions appear on the faces of the other people nearby. Surprise, curiosity, confusion. The noise of the party fades, as if someone turned down the volume. Gavin slowly turns to where everyone is looking. He sees her. She stands in the doorway between the hallway and the living room. Ifeoma, but not the Ifeoma he expected. She doesn't look lost or scared. She doesn't slouch. She stands up straight in a simple dark blue dress, her posture suggesting calm and collectedness. Her face reveals nothing. No fear, no anger, no excitement. It's simply calm. This is not the reaction he was hoping for. His hand, holding the glass, pauses halfway from his stomach to his mouth. The smile fades, leaving behind a blank, bewildered expression. For a second, Gavin's brain refuses to process the information. This doesn't fit the script. She should have entered hunched over, her eyes searching the corner, but she simply stands there, staring. No, she's not even looking at him. She's staring into space, as if assessing the situation, and there's not a shred of his importance in that assessment. A cold trickle of something unpleasant runs down his spine. His plan, so clear and simple, begins to show its first cracks. At first, Gavin sees only her, his ex-wife, who somehow doesn't look humiliated. Then his brain, refusing to believe he's failed, starts searching for reasons. Maybe she's just pretending, maybe it's bravado. And then his gaze, almost against his will, shifts to the right, away from her, toward the figure slightly behind and to the left of her. Gavin sees a man, tall, in a dark suit. The man stands completely still. He doesn't shift from foot to foot, doesn't look around, doesn't smile. His arms hang loosely by his sides. He simply is. But this stillness has such a dense, concentrated confidence that it seems almost like a physical field. Gavin peers at him. He doesn't recognize this man. Not at all. This isn't someone from their old circle. This isn't one of Ifeoma's colleagues he's heard about. He's not behind her like a servant. He's behind her, slightly offset, like a shield, like a quiet but undeniable statement. She's not alone. She came with me. Gavin's small, triumphant thoughts are shattered by this realization. His mind races. Who is this? Just a friend? A new guy? Why is he so quiet? Why does he exude such a sense of quiet strength? Gavin feels his own confidence, which had just filled him to the brim, begin to drain away like water from a cracked glass. He still holds the glass, but now it's just a frozen gesture. Tae-min doesn't make a single unnecessary movement. He followed Ifeoma inside and took his position. His eyes glided slowly, unhurriedly, around the room. He doesn't seek anyone's gaze, doesn't try to size anyone up. He simply scans the space, noting the exits, the positions of people, the overall dynamics. It's an automatic, professional reading of the situation. He sees Gavin. He sees his frozen posture, his blank expression. He notes it and immediately shifts his gaze. This man is the reason for their visit, but for Tae-min, he's just a piece of furniture, a potential source of trouble to be kept under surveillance. Tae-min's presence isn't aggressive. He doesn't project a sense of menace, but there's something about his absolute, relaxed composure that changes the air in the room. The formerly boisterous, uninhibited spirit of the party, the shouting, the loud laughter, the rude glances, clashes with him and fades. People instinctively sense this change. They don't understand who this man is, but their instinct tells them he's not the kind of person to play pranks on or put on airs with. His silence speaks louder than any bravado. His calm is stronger than any fuss. Gavin's realm now exists in two realities. In one, the music is still playing, the lights are lit, and glasses are set out. In the other, there's a quiet epicenter by the door, consisting of a woman in a blue dress and an unmoving man behind her. And the second reality is stronger. It draws all the attention, making the first seem cheap and unreal. Taemin still stands silently. He's allowed the atmosphere to shift. He's allowed everyone present, and especially Gavin, to sense the new balance of power. He's waiting for the next move, but no longer from himself. He's waiting to see what the host of the house will do, whose little scene just collapsed before it even began. The silence in the room is not complete. The music continues, but now it sounds dull and out of place, like an orchestra playing in an empty hall. The hum of voices has disappeared, replaced by other sounds. The soft clinking of a glass as someone awkwardly sets it down on the table. The rustle of clothing as people shift positions. A muffled cough and a whisper, short, clipped whispers that float around the corners. Is that Ifeoma? She looks different. Who's that with her? I didn't think Gavin said she was bringing anyone. Look at Gavin. He's in shock. All eyes now dart between 3 points. Ifeoma and the stranger at the door, and Gavin, frozen in the corner. The guests, his friends, his audience, read his state the way dogs read fear. They see his smug smile disappear. They see him lower his glass. They see the confusion in his eyes that he desperately tries to hide. This confusion is the loudest signal to everyone. If Gavin had smiled and rushed forward with a hug, the situation would have remained under his control. But he froze, and his confusion was instantly transmitted to everyone. The party, which had been his triumph, now turns into a theater where the lead actor has forgotten his role. The guests feel awkward. They don't know how to act. Laugh? Greet Ifeoma? Ignore him? They look to Gavin, waiting for his cue, but he offers none. The air becomes thick with tension and awkward curiosity. Gavin feels dozens of eyes on him. He realizes his pause has gone on too long, that he's losing by simply standing there. His insides clench with rage and panic. Everything has gone wrong. But he can't just stand there. He forces his muscles to move. He takes a sip from his glass, buying himself a second. He places the glass on the nearest shelf. He squares his shoulders, trying to regain his air of mastery. A smile creeps across his face, but it's not the same wide, confident smile. It's a tense, forced grimace that doesn't reach his eyes. He begins to walk across the room. His gait is unnaturally straight, a little stiff. He tries not to look around, but he feels everyone's eyes following him. The walk from the corner to the door feels like a kilometer long. He stops in front of Ifeoma, too close, as he always did, trying to invade her personal space. But this time, the trick isn't working. She doesn't back down. She simply looks at him, and her calm gaze seems unbearable. Ifeoma, you've arrived, he says. His voice is louder than it needs to be, trying to cut through the music and fill the silence. There's no trace of the sweet tone he'd heard on the phone, only tension. You called, she simply replies. Nothing more. His gaze slides to the man. He's forced to acknowledge him. And this is your friend? The phrase comes out somehow condescendingly, with a hint, but the hint hangs in the air, unanswered. Ifeoma turns slightly toward Taemin, as if introducing him to the room. Her movements are smooth, without fuss. Gavin, this is Taemin, my friend. Taemin, this is Gavin, the host of the party. She doesn't say, my ex-husband. She doesn't apologize for his presence. She doesn't try to explain. She simply states the facts, as if introducing two neutral acquaintances at a social event. This ordinariness disarms Gavin more than any hostility. Taemin looks at Gavin. His eyes meet his master's for a split second. He doesn't smile. He doesn't frown. He doesn't nod. He simply looks. And in that gaze, there's no challenge, no interest, no judgment. There's only the affirmation. I see you. Then Taemin bows his head slightly, a barely perceptible gesture of politeness. He doesn't extend his hand for a handshake. His arms remain relaxed at his sides. It's a silent but clear demarcation. He's not here to make friends. He's here as Ifeoma's escort. Gavin, programmed for social rituals, automatically extends his hand forward, but when he doesn't receive a return gesture, he awkwardly freezes and lowers it. He feels a flush of shame spreading down his neck. He looks like a fool in front of everyone. They simply are, and that's enough to turn his world upside down. There's a pause after the introductions. Gavin stands there, feeling like an idiot, his hand hanging at his side. He waits for Taemin to say something. Anything. Apologize for not shaking hands? Introduce himself more fully? Compliment the party? But Taemin remains silent. He only acknowledges the introduction, with a barely perceptible nod, more a sign of having heard Ifeoma's words than a sign of pleasure at their acquaintance. Now his gaze, after glancing at Gavin, returns to its previous neutral point. He observes the room, not as a guest, but as a caretaker. His attention is scattered, noticing everything but lingering on nothing in particular. And in this complete, utter disregard for Gavin as an object of interest lies an unbearable tension. Gavin feels like he's standing under a magnifying glass. Every breath, every micro-movement seems unnatural and loud. He feels a cold sweat creeping down his back. This silent man is doing nothing. He's just standing there, but his silence is a loud question, one to which Gavin has no answer. A question about his right to behave as he did before. A question about his authority in this room. Gavin tries to catch Taemin's eye, trying to read anything in it. Disdain, mockery, defiance. But Taemin looks away. That's worse. It means Gavin isn't even worth looking at. His nerves are taut. He wants to shout, "Hey, you! Who are you? What are you doing here?" But he can't, because this man isn't doing anything. He's just a friend who came with Ifeoma, and any aggression from Gavin now will make him look hysterical and out of control in the eyes of the guests. While an awkward silence lingers in the center of the room, life begins to stir around its edges. The guests, having recovered from the initial shock, begin to chat quietly. But now their conversations aren't about work or vacation plans, but about only one thing. "I don't understand anything. Who is this guy?" The girl hisses at her boyfriend by the fireplace, covering her mouth with her hand. "I don't know, but look at him. He's not even trying to smile. It's like he owns the place. And Ifeoma, she's completely different from how I remember her. She always used to keep her eyes downcast." Gavin is completely stupefied. It seems like he was counting on something else. Of course he was. He hinted to us all that she would crawl back alone and that we'd feel sorry for her. And look how she came. With that, what's his name? Taemin? I wonder what kind of person he is. He looks serious. Gavin is clearly afraid of him. Look how tense he is. Whispers spread from group to group like an electric shock. Eyes that had once waited with curiosity and condescension to see Gavin humiliate Ifeoma now watch with interest, even a slight thirst for spectacle. As Gavin falls into his own trap, sympathy for him evaporates. His confusion is too obvious, and the new couple at the door is too intriguing. The guests' attention is now clearly divided. They glance between Gavin, Ifeoma, and Taemin, comparing them, and the comparison is clearly not in the host's favor. His stiff posture and strained smile contrast with their calm, almost detached confidence. The dynamic of the evening has shifted dramatically. Now the interest is not in what Gavin will say, but in what will happen next with these new characters. Gavin hears the whispers. He catches fragments of phrases. He feels the focus slipping away from him. He has to do something. Reclaim his role as hospitable host. Take control of the situation, at least formally. He clears his throat, forcing his forced smile to widen a little. "Well then, excellent," he says, again too loudly. "Glad you made it. Don't just stand there in the doorway. Come in!" He gestures broadly toward the room, as if opening the way for them into his world. The gesture is empty because they are already in this world. "What can I pour you?" he continues, clinging to the most basic, everyday function of host. "I have some excellent wine, or something stronger. Beer?" He looks at Ifeoma, trying to catch her eye, to return her to her old role as a guest obligated to choose something, to thank her, to join in the game. But she looks not at him, but at Taemin, as if asking his silent permission, or simply delegating this minor everyday matter to him. Gavin looks at Taemin, waiting for an answer. Any answer. Even a wine, please. That would bring back some normalcy. Taemin slowly turns his head and looks directly at Gavin. His eyes remain calm. He opens his mouth to reply. Gavin involuntarily freezes in anticipation. "No thank you," says Taemin. His voice is quiet, low, but perfectly audible in the silent room. There's no rudeness or politeness in it, only finality. "We won't be drinking anything." Once again, he refuses to play by Gavin's rules. He refuses the invitation that is the cornerstone of any party, the host-guest ritual. He simply stands there, present, and that's enough for him. His refusal isn't a personal attack, it's simply a statement of fact. They're not here to drink his wine and participate in his celebration. They're here for other reasons, ones Gavin is already afraid to comprehend. Gavin's proposal hangs in the air, unaccepted. His attempt to regain control is met with a simple, polite, no. The word no hangs in the air, pure and undeniable. Taemin adds nothing to it. "No, we just walked in. No, we've already had drinks. No, thanks for the offer. Simply, no, thank you. It's not rude. It's even polite, judging by the tone. But it's a complete dismissal, a refusal not just of a drink, but of the entire system of hospitality that Gavin is trying to impose. Gavin blinks, his mind racing for a way out of this impasse. He can't insist. He can't say, at least some water. That would look even more pathetic. Oh, I see, he manages to say. Well, whatever. If you change your mind, he waves his hand toward the drinks table, the gesture now seeming helpless. Taemin doesn't answer. He simply tilts his head slightly toward the table, as if noting the information, and returns his gaze to Ifeoma. The conversation is over. The ritual has failed. Gavin stands empty-handed, while his guests refuse the host's most basic offer. He feels his face burn. All the authority he's built up all evening crumbles with 2 words. Inside Gavin, he clearly sees his plan. Elegant and clever, he thought, unraveling before his eyes. He'd been counting on a script in which he was the director, and Ifeoma, an awkward extra. But now the script has been rewritten, and he doesn't even know his role. He feels less like the boss, and more like a boy throwing a noisy party at his parents' house. And then his mature, calm father walks in. The music is still playing, but it sounds silly. The balloons and garlands seem cheap and childish. His friends, whom he counted on for support, now look at him with curiosity, and in their gazes he detects not sympathy, but an assessment of his weakness. He's isolated. Physically, he stands in the center of his living room, but emotionally, he's cut off by a chasm from everyone. From Ifeoma and her silent companion, who form their own world, inaccessible to him. From his guests, who now observe him as an exhibit. Even from his own home, which suddenly ceased to be his fortress. He wants to do something, shout at them, throw them out, but he can't. Because technically, they're not doing anything wrong. They're being polite. They came by invitation. They're just not playing his game. And that leaves him completely unsettled. His revenge has turned against him, and he stands in the ruins of his evening, unsure what to say next. While Gavin flounders in the mire of his own confusion, the attention in the room shifts completely and irrevocably. The guests have already finished their jokes. Now they are openly watching, but they are not watching Gavin. Their gazes are drawn to the couple by the door. Their interest grows with every second of Gavin's silence. Ifeoma is no longer a ghost from the past to be laughed at. She is an enigma. She hasn't arrived broken, but with this incredibly calm, serious man. Who is he? Why is he acting like this? What is going on between them? People begin to notice details. The way Ifeoma stands, straight, without fuss. The way Taemin's gaze occasionally, almost imperceptibly, glides around the room, as if noticing faces. The quiet, silent understanding between them. They don't need to speak to feel connected. One of the guests, an older woman who had previously been skeptical of Ifeoma, now looks at her with new respect. A couple at the appetizer table whispers, nodding in their direction. Look, she's not even looking at Gavin. It's like he's not even there. Another guest catches Taemin's eye briefly and involuntarily looks away, feeling an inexplicable discomfort. Gavin's party isn't over, but its center of gravity has shifted. The energy, the laughter, the conversation, all of it now happens on the periphery. The real action, quiet and tense, unfolds at the entrance, and the guests, like audience members at a theater, instinctively turn toward the stage. They await the next act, but it's clear that Gavin is no longer the star. He's been sidelined, and the leading roles now belong to these two, who don't even raise their voices. And in this silence lies true power, compelling everyone to pay attention. The awkward silence following Taemin's refusal begins to weigh heavily on everyone. Gavin doesn't know what to do next. His friends sense this awkwardness, and one of them, Mark, decides to save the situation. Mark has always been the loudest, loved being the center of attention, and considered himself the life of the party. He's had enough to pluck up courage, but not enough to completely lose touch with reality. He breaks away from the group by the fireplace and comes a little closer, a grin spreading across his face. So, he begins, addressing Taemin more than Ifeoma. So? Just a friend? Interesting. We're all old friends of Gavin's here. He pauses, waiting for a reaction, but gets none. How do you two know each other, exactly? How long? The question sounds like simple curiosity, but there's a hint, a challenge in his tone. He seems to be testing the waters of his just a friend story. His whole demeanor says, "Come on, tell me how you really got here." The guests fall silent, listening. This is the first direct challenge to the new guests, and everyone waits to see what happens next. Gavin tenses internally. Part of him wants Mark to teach this arrogant man a lesson, but another part of him vaguely senses danger. Taman slowly turns his head and looks at Mark. His gaze isn't angry or irritated. It's appraising, as if he's just noticed this man's presence and is assessing him. His gaze slides over Mark's figure, from his face to his not-so-fresh shirt, and back to his eyes. This silent examination lasts only a few seconds, but Mark involuntarily stops smiling. "A long time ago," Taman finally says, his voice still even. "Is that enough?" A question for a question. Brief, clear, and completely uninformative. He doesn't say where they met. He doesn't say how. He simply confirms the fact of their acquaintance and immediately sets a barrier. Further questions are unwelcome. There's no aggression in his tone, but there's a slight weariness, as if he's being distracted from something more important. Mark opens his mouth to ask another, more insistent question, but meets Taman's eyes and falls silent. There's no threat in those eyes. There's only absolute clarity and a certain detachment that says, "You're noise. I hear you, but you're not important." This is more disconcerting than anger. Mark isn't used to being ignored with such calm confidence. He mumbles something incoherent like, "Well, just curious," and takes a step back toward his group, feeling foolish. His attempt to join the game has failed at the start. Taman is already looking past him, as if the episode is over. He's made the rules clear. He's not here to report to Gavin's company. In one sentence, he's outlined a line that shouldn't be crossed. Gavin watches this brief scene, and the final turning point occurs within him. He sees his most talkative friend retreat, unable to get more than 2 words out of the man. He sees the guests who had been watching this now look at Taman, not with curiosity, but with growing respect, mingled with apprehension. This man isn't playing. He's not part of their party. He's there, like a rock in a stormy sea, and all the waves crash against his silence. Gavin's entire plan, a plan for a small, elegant humiliation, was built on the premise that Ifeoma would be alone and vulnerable, that she would be at his mercy, at the mercy of his friends, that she would play by his rules. But she didn't come alone. She came with her own defense, and this defense isn't loud, not aggressive. It's quiet and absolute. She doesn't fight his plan. She simply makes it impossible, pointless. How can one humiliate a man who stands beside such a silent, unshakable force? How can one mock a woman whose companion can make even the most insolent retreat with a single glance? Gavin realizes his revenge has failed miserably. It's failed miserably. What's more, it's turned against him. Now he looks less like a cunning avenger and more like a petty, short-sighted man who underestimated his ex-wife. Now, instead of Ifeoma being laughed at in the corner, he'll be the one being whispered about behind his back. The idea of making her regret leaving has resulted in him vaguely regretting his call. He needs to change his plan immediately. The old one has fallen apart. There's only one new one left. Minimize the damage. Save face. Somehow get through this evening without looking like a complete fool. He doesn't know how yet, but he understands that continuing to try to provoke or test them is futile and dangerous. Dangerous for his reputation, for his already shaky authority. He must act differently. But how? That's the hardest question. And he doesn't yet have an answer. The tension in the center of the room eases slightly after Mark's question. People slowly return to their conversations, but now they're quieter, and glances more often at the new guests. Ifeoma, sensing the first, most difficult threshold has been crossed, takes a deep breath and decides to act naturally. She notices a familiar face among the guests, Sarah, the wife of one of Gavin's colleagues. Sarah has always been neutral, never participating in the teasing. Ifeoma gently touches Taman's arm, drawing his attention, and nods towards Sarah. He bows his head slightly, indicating his presence. Ifeoma approaches Sarah. Sarah looks at her with genuine, if surprised interest. "Ifeoma, it's really great to see you," Sarah says, and there's no falsehood in her voice. "You look wonderful." "Thank you, Sarah. You too," Ifeoma replies. Her voice is even, calm. She makes no excuses for her presence. "And this is your friend?" Sarah glances cautiously at Taman, who has stopped 2 steps away, giving them space to talk. "Yes, Taman," Ifeoma says simply, without elaborating. "It's very nice to meet you." Sarah nods in his direction. Taman responds with the same slight, almost invisible nod, his face remaining politely neutral. They talk about trivial matters, about how the city has changed, about new cafes that have opened. If Oma doesn't ask about Gavin, doesn't talk about the past, she acts as if she's meeting an old acquaintance on neutral territory, and there's strength in this normality. Before, at parties like these, she would have clung to every kind glance like a lifeline. Now she simply connects. She doesn't try to please, doesn't make excuses. She is there. Both Sarah and the people around her, eavesdropping furtively, sense it. Ifeoma's confidence isn't ostentatious, not aggressive. It comes from within, from the quiet knowledge that she's not alone here, that there's an unshakable wall behind her. She doesn't even glance back at Taemin to check if he's there. She knows he is. While Ifeoma speaks, Taemin doesn't stand still. He moves slowly, almost imperceptibly, taking up a position slightly to the side, from where he has a clear view of Ifeoma, most of the room, and, most importantly, Gavin. He doesn't stare at his host. His gaze glides over him from time to time, like a radar beam, registering his condition. Taemin watches Gavin attempt to resume his role as host. He approaches a group of guests, says something, and laughs too loudly. But his laughter sounds nervous, and his gestures seem exaggerated. Taemin notices Gavin glancing at them, at Ifeoma, and at him. These glances are quick, anxious. Taemin also studies Gavin's surroundings. He notices Mark, who has retreated, now angrily whispering something to his friend, casting angry glances in his direction. He sees the other friends discussing something, gesturing wildly, clearly agitated by what has just happened. He reads their body language. There is potential aggression, but it is currently contained by confusion and his own, Taemin's, calm presence. His observation isn't hostile, it's analytical. He assesses the threat level, the group dynamics, the emotional state of key players. He doesn't jump to conclusions. He simply collects data. His own breathing is even, his posture relaxed, but the readiness for action is palpable in every muscle, though not overtly so. He's a guard, scanning the area while his charge goes about her business. Gavin tries. He really does try to have fun, to drink, to joke, but his thoughts are entirely there, at the door, where this stranger stands. And with each passing minute, Gavin feels his gaze on him. It's not a constant, intense gaze. It's something worse. These are fleeting but precise touches. He turns and catches Taemin's eyes on him, which then slowly look away. He takes a sip and feels as if his movement, his sip, has just been recorded. He says something to his friend, and he has the strange sensation that his words have been heard and appreciated, even through the noise of the music. This invisible, yet constant monitoring is driving him crazy. He's starting to worry. What is this man seeing? What are they thinking? Is they watching him? Gavin feels like his every gesture, every hesitant smile, is being analyzed, picked apart. His anxiety is growing. He feels like a lab animal being monitored. And the worst part is, he can't resist it. He can't come up to them and say, "Stop looking at me," because technically, Taemin isn't doing anything wrong. He's simply standing there, looking around, like any other guest. But his gaze doesn't have the absent-mindedness of someone relaxing. It has a focused attentiveness, directed, among other things, at Gavin. This anxiety paralyzes Gavin. He loses the thread of conversations. His jokes become flat and ill-timed. A mixture of fear and anger boils inside him, fear of the incomprehensible threat that Taemin represents, and anger at himself, at Ifeoma, at this entire evening, which has gone so horribly wrong. He wants it to end, but he is the boss. He can't just ask them to leave. He is trapped in his own cage, and the quiet, watching gaze from the outside only tightens the screws. Ifeoma's conversation with Sarah drags on. They discuss something that makes Sarah smile, and Ifeoma nods with a slight, natural smile. Taemin sees that she's calm, engaged in the conversation, and in a safe, neutral environment. He assesses the room again. His gaze falls on Gavin, who, trying to hide his nervousness, is pouring himself another drink at the makeshift bar, a long table laden with bottles and glasses. Having made his decision, Taemin smoothly moves away from his position next to Ifeoma. He doesn't tell her he's leaving. There's no need. He simply begins to slowly move along the wall, not directly toward the bar, but in an arc, as if studying a painting on the wall or simply finding a new spot. His movement is almost imperceptible. He doesn't draw attention to himself with his abrupt departure. He passes a group of guests, nods neutrally at someone's casual glance, and ends up at the opposite end of the drinks table. He stands there for a second, his gaze sliding over the bottles, as if he's finally considering a glass of water. But he doesn't take anything. Gavin stands, leaning his elbow on the table, his back to the center of the room. He stares into the golden liquid in his glass, trying to collect his thoughts. He feels Tamien's presence, somewhere behind him, pressing down on him like a physical weight. Suddenly, he feels a subtle shift in the air nearby, a barely perceptible shadow falling across the table. He slowly turns his head. Tamien stands next to him, an arm's length away. He doesn't look at Gavin. He's staring straight ahead at the wall, his arms hanging at his sides. It seems he's simply come for a drink. Gavin freezes, his fingers whitening as he grips his glass. The music and the hum of voices suddenly become muted, as if someone had turned off the sound. His attention shifts to the man next to him. Tamien doesn't turn to face him. He simply begins speaking. His voice is quiet, even, intended for one listener only. It sounds so calm that by contrast, it seems icy. "Gavin," Tamien says, using his first name for the first time, "you invited Ifioma to get her in trouble. It was petty and very stupid." He pauses microscopically, letting the words sink in. He still doesn't look at him. "I want you to understand one thing. From this evening on, you leave her alone. Completely. No calls, no casual encounters, no conversations about her with these people." He gestures to the guests with a barely perceptible nod of his head. Another pause. The quiet, yet incredibly dense space between them is filled only with the meaning of these words. "You live your life. She lives hers. Our paths don't cross." This isn't a request. This is a new rule. You will accept it and follow it, because the alternative, you won't like it. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't raise his voice. He simply states the facts, like an engineer explaining a law of physics. There's no malice in his tone. There's only absolute, unmistakable confidence that this is how it will be. The words hit Gavin like blades, sharp and precise. He hears more than just a threat, carefully wrapped in the form of a rule. He hears a complete, unconditional understanding of his motives. Petty. Stupid! It's a verdict, passed without a trial, and its precision takes his breath away. But what strikes him most is the tone. It's not the hot-blooded anger of a new guy who's been wronged. It's distance, a cold, insurmountable dynata. Tamien speaks to him like an adult to a disobedient child, to whom the obvious is being wearily explained. There's a complete lack of fear in this tone, and complete control of the situation. Everything Gavin had planned, all his petty intrigues, his desire to look like a winner, all of it suddenly became not just a failure, but pathetic, childish, insignificant in the face of this calm force. The physical reaction is immediate. The blood drains from his face. His skin turns a grayish pale, waxy. Even his lips lose their color. His hand holding the glass begins to tremble, a fine, rapid shudder that makes the liquid tremble, threatening to spill. His eyes widen, but he can't tear his gaze away from Tamien's profile, who continues to stare calmly ahead. He wants to say something, to object, to shout, "Who the hell are you?" But his tongue feels like cotton, his throat constricted. He realizes this isn't the kind of person his usual methods, shouting, lying, attempting manipulation, work on. This person sees right through him and sets the rules. And Gavin, deep down, knows he has no choice but to accept them. The realization of his own helplessness and the scale of his mistake makes the world around him spin. The only thing that remains clear is the pale reflection of his frightened face in the dark glass of the bottle on the table and the motionless figure of the man next to him, who has already said everything he needs to say. Tamien's words hang in the air between them, heavy and final. Gavin can't respond. His mind, filled with panic and resentment just a second ago, suddenly becomes cold and clear. This clarity is more terrifying than any hysteria. He looks at the profile of the man next to him. He sees absolute stillness, control over every muscle. He hears echoes of short, punch-like phrases. Petty, stupid, rule, alternative. This is not the language spoken in his world, a world of gossip, ostentatious bravado, and petty jabs. This is a language of a different order, the language of people who don't threaten, but state consequences, who don't argue, but set boundaries. And suddenly Gavin realizes who he's dealing with. This isn't just a new guy. This isn't just a confident person. This is something else. This quiet, unshakable confidence doesn't come out of nowhere. It's born of experiences Gavin can only guess at, and these experiences clearly lie far beyond the boundaries of his own, suddenly seemingly toy-like, reality. He realizes the scale of his mistake. Like a child teasing a passerby, he finds himself face to face, not with an ordinary person, but with something akin to a tiger, which until that moment had simply been sleeping in a cage, and which he himself, foolishly, woke and tried to poke with a stick. His plan for revenge, this whole party, his desire to appear victorious, all of it suddenly becomes not just ridiculous, but deadly childish. Cold sweat breaks out on his back under his shirt. The trembling in his hand doesn't subside. He understands that his well-being, his peaceful life, now depend on one thing: his unquestioning acceptance of these new rules. And this understanding burns away everything within him: anger, resentment, and the desire for revenge. Only one instinct remains: the instinct of self-preservation. Taemin, having finished speaking, stands motionless for another second, as if giving Gavin time to digest the information. Then he slowly walks away from the bar and returns to where he can observe Ifeoma. His job is done. Gavin is left alone at the table. He sets down his glass because he can't hold it anymore. He takes several deep, uneven breaths. Then, driven by a new, cold necessity, he pushes away from the table and crosses the room. His steps are heavy but purposeful. He approaches Ifeoma, who is still talking to Sarah. Both women fall silent upon seeing his face. Sarah takes a step back, realizing something important is happening. Gavin stops in front of Ifeoma. He can't look up to meet her gaze. His eyes are focused somewhere near her shoulder. "Ifeoma-ki," he says, his voice hoarse, strained. He clears his throat. I want to apologize." The room becomes quiet again. The music is still playing, but now no one can hear it. "My call, my invitation." He struggles to find the words, each one burning in his throat. "It was wrong. I behaved badly. I'm sorry. And I want you to know, it won't happen again, ever." He finally looks up. His face is still pale, and his eyes hold not remorse but a desperate, animal-like seriousness. He's apologizing not because he regrets it, but because he must. This makes his words even more eerie and sincere in their forced nature. The guests in the room froze in utter amazement. They saw Gavin approach the bar. They saw Ifeoma's silent companion appear beside him. They didn't hear the words, but they saw Gavin's back tense, and then he suddenly turned pale. And now they see it. Gavin, their self-assured, always-in-control friend. Gavin. He stands with his head down and, stammering, apologizes in front of everyone to his ex-wife, to the one whose arrival they should all have laughed at. The whispers that had been creeping through the room now die, replaced by a deathly silence. Someone froze with a glass halfway to their mouth. Someone stopped chewing. The girl by the fireplace covered her parted mouth with her hand. Mark, the one who asked the question, looks at Gavin with mute shock, in which not a trace of his former complacency remains. No one understands exactly what happened at the bar, but the result is clear. Something, or someone, forced Gavin not just to back down, but to publicly capitulate. And that something clearly involved the tall Korean man, who now stands to the side, watching his apology with the same impassive expression he'd worn throughout the evening. The air is filled with surprise, mixed with keen curiosity, and, for some, a sudden awakening of respect for Ifeoma. She didn't just come with protection, she came with a force that could break a will. Gavin in a matter of minutes. The party had completely transformed into something else. This was no longer Gavin's triumph. It was a show of power, quiet and undeniable, centered on the woman everyone here considered weak, and that changed everything. Ifeoma listens to Gavin's apology. She sees his pale face, his trembling hands, and hears his broken voice. She feels no triumph, no pity. Inside her, there is a quiet, cold calm. He speaks words she has never heard from him before, but they come too late and for the wrong reasons. They are not sincere. They are forced, and that makes them unimportant. He finishes. The whole room waits with bated breath for her reaction. Ifeoma nods slowly, once. Her face remains even, without a smile or a grimace of disgust. "I accept your apology, Gavin," she says clearly, so everyone can hear. Her voice does not waver. "From this moment on, we part ways. For good. I hold no grudge, but I also do not want any contact. I wish you well." She doesn't extend her hand to him. She doesn't take a step toward him. She simply states a fact, as if drawing a line under a long, unsuccessful document. Her cold politeness is a wall. She accepts his capitulation, but gives him nothing in return. No forgiveness, no hope of future communication, only a clean, final break. And there's more dignity in this restraint than in any loud speech. Ifeoma turns to Sarah, who's still standing nearby, her eyes wide. "It was nice seeing you, Sarah," Ifeoma says in a casual, even warm tone, as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. Then she turns and meets Taemin's gaze. He's already standing closer to the door, knowing without words that the mission is complete. Her nod is almost invisible, but he catches it. They walk toward the exit together. He's half a step behind them again. They don't hurry, they don't look back. They simply walk through the deathly silence, through dozens of pairs of eyes glued to them. Gavin remains standing in his place, his head bowed, unable to look after them. Taemin opens the front door, lets Ifeoma in first, and follows him out. The door closes softly behind them, cutting off the world of the party, Gavin's world, from them once and for all. The click of the lock seems surprisingly loud in the stillness of the night. They get into the car. Taemin starts the engine, and the quiet hum drowns out the last echoes of music from the house. He doesn't drive off right away, giving her time to recover. Ifeoma sits, staring straight ahead at the dark, lantern-lit street. She inhales deeply and exhales. The tension she's been holding in all evening begins to slowly dissolve, leaving behind a slight tremor in her knees and a strange emptiness. "Thank you, Taemin," she says finally, not looking at him. Her voice is quiet but clear in the silence of the car. You were perfect. You did nothing, and that changed everything." She turns to face him. He's looking at the road, his profile illuminated by the dim light of the dashboard. "I don't know what you said to him," she continues, "and I don't need to know, but I saw his face. That's enough. Thank you for being there. Thank you for the silence." She wasn't just referring to the absence of words, but to the calm, impenetrable space he'd created around them both, a space in which all the little jabs and caustic glances simply lost their power. Taemin nods, accepting her gratitude. "You did it yourself," he says simply. "I was just a shadow. You spoke when you had to. You kept quiet when it was right. This is your victory." He puts the car into gear, and it starts moving smoothly, taking them away from this house. Ifeoma leans back in her seat and looks out the side window. City lights float past, creating long, blurry streaks. The trembling in her body subsides. The emptiness inside is gradually filled with a new feeling, lightness. She thinks of Gavin's pale face, of his apologies, torn from fear. And she understands that this is the end. Not a dramatic, not a loud one, but a quiet and final one. The chapter of her life called Gavin is over. There will be no more alarm bells, no more hints, no more attempts to regain control over her. What happened today broke something in him forever. Not because of threats, but because of a cold, undeniable understanding of the imbalance of power. She doesn't feel joy. She feels peace, a deep, abyssal peace. She is truly free, not just legally, but emotionally. His ghost, which sometimes still loomed at the edge of her consciousness, has now dissipated forever. She looks at Taemin, who drives silently. She doesn't know what will happen next in her life, but she knows that the old door has slammed shut, and in the silence that follows, there is no fear. There is only the road ahead and the calm confidence that she can finally walk it without looking back. The car drives through the night streets. The silence inside is not tense, but comfortable, like a soft blanket after a long day. Ifeoma watches the shadows and streetlights alternate. "Can I just go for a drive?" she asks quietly. "I'm not ready to go home right away. It'll be too quiet." Taemin simply nods and turns off the usual route to her house, heading for the embankment. He understands without words. She needs time to shake off the atmosphere of that house, the energy of humiliation that, despite her victory, still clung to her skin like a spider web. 15 minutes later, they stop at a viewing platform overlooking the river. "He never apologized," Ifeoma says suddenly, looking out at the dark water. "In all the time we were together, not once, even when he was clearly in the wrong. He always found a way to turn the situation around, so it looked like I'd misunderstood something, or overreacted." Taemin remains silent, letting her speak. "He apologized today, but it was like he was forced to take medicine. Bitter, disgusting, and you know it's for your own good, but there's no honesty in it." She turns to him. "What did you tell him?" Taemin looks at the city lights on the other side of the river. "I told the truth, that his behavior was petty and stupid, and that he should stop. Sometimes people don't hear the truth until it's spoken right in front of them, especially people like him. They live in their own fairy tales. He was scared of you," Ifeoma states. "It wasn't me that scared him. It was the prospect of consequences. Up until that moment, there had been no consequences for him. You left, and that was it. His world didn't collapse. He decided he could continue to harass you with impunity. I simply showed him that his actions would have a price from now on. And that price was one he couldn't afford. Again, there's no boasting in his words, just facts. Ifeoma hugs himself, even though the car isn't cold. I feel like I've been using you as a shield, as a weapon. Taemin finally turns his head toward her, his eyes dark in the dim light. You asked for company. I provided it. Everything that happened next was a logical progression. He chose to be aggressive. I chose to stop it. You were the cause, not the participant, of this exchange. You held your own, and that's the main thing. You didn't stoop to his level. He says this with such confidence that her doubts melt away. He doesn't consider her indebted. He accepts it as a natural consequence. What now? She asks. Now? That's it. You'll close this door. Not just formally. Inside. You'll throw out the old things if you haven't already. Rearrange the furniture. He won't come anymore, won't call. His friends will stay away too. You've got your piece. Now, you just have to learn how to use it. He starts the car. I'll take you home. You need to rest. On the way back, Ifeoma looks out the window again. But now her thoughts aren't about the past. They're about the strange silence that now surrounds Taemin in her perception. It's not emptiness. It's depth. She'd always sensed a restrained strength in him, but today she saw it in action. Precise, cold, solving problems with one precise movement, like a surgeon removing a tumor. And there was nothing personal about it. It was just work. He stops at her house. She doesn't get out right away. Taemin. Yes? Thank you. Not just for today. For understanding. You never ask too much, and now you don't demand gratitude. Gratitude is not required. Seeing someone find peace is already a reward. For the first time, a hint of something that could be mistaken for warmth appears in his voice. Very restrained, very distant, like the warmth from a stove at the other end of a large room. She gets out of the car. Good night! Good night, Ifeoma! She goes up to her apartment. She turns on the light. The silence here is different now. It's not oppressive. It's welcoming. She undresses, takes off that same blue dress, and carefully hangs it in the closet. It has served its purpose. The next morning, she wakes to the familiar sound of her alarm, but the feeling in her chest is new. Lightness. As if someone had lifted from her shoulders the heavy, wet cloak she'd been wearing for so long, she'd stopped noticing it. She makes coffee and stands by the window. The sunlight seems brighter. She remembers Gavin's face, pale with fear, and feels nothing. No malice, no pity, just an empty space where the old pain used to be. A few days later, she meets Taemin again. This time, just for lunch. They talk about books, the new museum exhibition, his business. He casually mentions the negotiations that went well. She doesn't ask for details. He doesn't offer any. A new balance has settled between them. They haven't suddenly become close friends. But the invisible wall that usually separates people when one owes something to another has disappeared. The debt was settled not with words, but with a silent understanding. One day, a couple of weeks later, she passes a store window and sees one of the guests from the party, Mark. He notices her, and their eyes meet for a second. Before, she would have seen mockery or condescension in his eyes. Now she sees a quick, almost imperceptible glance away, a slight nod, and the way he quickens his pace. No fear, no hostility, just the understanding that their worlds no longer intersect. And that's exactly what she needed. One evening, Taemin calls her. Unrelated. Just like that. Is everything all right? He asks. Perfectly, she replies, and it's the honest truth. Fine. They chat for a few more minutes about nothing. Before hanging up, he says, You've gotten stronger. It was noticeable back then at the party. Now it's even more noticeable. I've always been strong. I just need a reminder sometimes, she says. On the other end of the line, she hears a light, almost imperceptible sound that could be mistaken for a quiet laugh. Good night, strong man. Good night, guard. She puts down the phone and smiles into the empty room. The past is closed. The present is quiet and clear. The future is an open book, and for the first time in a long time, she can't wait to start reading it without looking over her shoulder at the old scribbled pages. The peace she'd longed for has finally taken shape and settled into her home, her schedule, the beat of her heart. And that was better than any revenge. 3 months have passed. Ifeoma's life has settled into a new, smoother routine. In the mornings, she goes to the gym, which has just opened near her home. In the evenings, she sometimes reads, sometimes watches movies. On weekends, she visits exhibitions and takes long walks. The simplicity of these activities fills her with a quiet joy. One day, while sorting through a box of old books on the mezzanine, she finds his old baseball cap. Gavin had forgotten it some time ago. Once this object would have caused a storm of emotions within her: irritation, sadness, the urge to throw it away, and guilt for that urge. Now she simply stares at the worn brim. Nothing, not a single surge of emotion. She places the cap in a bag with old rags for recycling, and that's it. At work, a colleague approaches her, having heard something through a third party about some wild party. "Are you okay?" she asks cautiously. "Everything's great." Efioma smiles sincerely. "Couldn't be better." The colleague sees it's true, and the topic is dropped forever. Taemin has become a part of her life, but not the center. He's like a massive, reliable rock in the landscape, not always the center of attention, but his presence on the horizon gives him confidence. They see each other once every week or two. They discuss everything except that evening. That topic is exhausted. Sometimes he helps her with advice when she's having trouble with her landlord or needs to choose a reliable car. His advice is always precise and practical. One day at a cafe, she runs into Sarah, the woman from the party. She waves cheerfully. "You know," Sarah says, after they've exchanged news, "after that night, Gavin kind of went downhill, sold his house, moved to a different neighborhood. Rumor has it he got a regular job, and he doesn't even remember his old life." Ifyoma shrugs. "It sounds like news about a distant acquaintance whose fate doesn't concern her." "I wish him luck," she says. And again, it's the honest truth. Just a wish into the void, devoid of emotion. That evening, she has dinner with Taemin. She tells him about her meeting with Sarah and the news about Gavin. Taemin listens, finishing his rice. "You didn't even blink when you told me?" he asks. "No, I was more interested in hearing about Sarah's new job." He nods, satisfied. So the process is complete. The ashes no longer smell of smoke. She understood this phrase. The past had been burned to the ground and no longer smoldered somewhere deep within. It had simply become fertilizer for the new soil. Before bed, she stands on the balcony. The city hums below. She's not thinking about what's ended. She's thinking about what's beginning. Tomorrow is her first class in a ceramics class she signed up for just for fun. She has vacation plans. She has a quiet Friday evening to spend however she chooses. She goes inside and turns off the light. There's no anxiety in the darkness. There's the weariness of a good day and the anticipation of the next. The chapter with Gavin isn't simply turned over. It's neatly filed away in her memory, where it will lie, undisturbed by dreams or random memories. This is true, hard-won peace. Not the absence of storms, but a strong, reliable home that can withstand any of them. And she finally feels like its master.